Cryptids and conspiracies, fictions, myths, and fantasies. We're blind to what each other sees. We're the paranoid Americans. UFOs, the men in black, reptilians in person and fully step. We've armed ourselves for the attack. We're the paranoid Americans. They're out to get us. Don't tell us they hate. Don't tell us we need to show some restraint. They're out to get us. We know that it's true. The paranoid American knows what to do. The paranoid American.
Critical blast logistics, getting it done, getting it there. Critical blast logistics, getting it done, getting it there. At a cursed crossroads, where souls collide, see the Prince of Darkness, see the Prince of Lies, while the world lies sleeping and the moon's aglow. They may meet with the devil, you know. When your heart is quaking and your soul can't rest, open up the pages of the devil you know best. People face their demons as each tale unfolds, but the devil's in the details, and their fate's been sold. Hear their fate's been sold, and they're lost to hell. That's the deal you have to make with the devil you know well.
I was sitting all alone in my library chair when I found a book and it gave me a scare. The pages I kept turning, it quite took me in. What was it? Oh, where do I begin? We read the monsters. I read the monsters next door. The monsters. It had short stories galore. The monsters. It's full of horror and gore. The monsters. I read the monsters next door.
Seconds to curtain, folks.
It's a Critical Blast podcast.
with special guest, Paranoid American.
And we are live. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, myopic proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, Chief Envelope Licker for Critical Blast Logistics, and I'm sure there's something else on my list of things that I have to do yet. We are live with Paranoid American, sir. How are you?
Good. How you doing, man? I like meeting a fellow envelope licker.
Hey, it's what, it keeps the diction working during the show. Yeah, because you got a thriving little publishing house there yourself.
It's definitely gotten big this year. I wouldn't have said thriving a couple years ago, but yeah, over the last year or two, it's been going great. I've been filling orders like left and right lately, so it's been awesome to be on this end of the experience after being on the other end of the stick for like over a decade.
Well, they were out to get you then.
Well, they still are. They still are. We just got more in the Army now.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to throw the link for paranoidamerican.com out into the chat. But we have a different campaign also, folks, that we're going to be talking about. And that link is right below the video. You can click on it at any time and go over to the comic book that we're talking about tonight. But before we get that far, tell us about, the origins of paranoidamerican.com. What was the impetus that kicked this off?
I mean, the main impetus is being a lifelong conspiracy theorist, but I also had the pleasure to work at Disney as an animator for just under 10 years, like 9 years and 11 months. I left just like a month shy of it. But I remembered at one point just looking around and thinking, I've got people in this room right now that have worked on Aladdin and Lion King and Eight Crazy Nights, which is the Adam Sandler one, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I was just remember thinking it would be crazy for me to not try and get these guys to draw something MK Ultra related or, draw me like a funny JFK assassination photo. So it kind of started as like, hey man, instead of drawing, that wacky octopus thing on the whiteboard today, let's just like draw mind control related stuff. And then started like edging them to get, closer and closer to more risque topics until they wouldn't do it on the whiteboard. But some of them agreed to maybe do it on paper and do a couple little initial series. So even my Time Samplers logo was done by one of my co-patriots when I was still at Disney.
Well, they were Disney animators. They were used to sliding sly things in to cause a conspiracy. Ariel's Castle Tower is going to live forever because of that.
I mean, technically they censored the cover.
Yeah.
In the re-releases.
In the re-releases, yes. but we'll always know it was there. And I don't know, sometimes I still find something that they're like, yeah, this was in an old Disney movie. I just recently saw that there was like this scene that got snuck into The Rescuers of all things.
So that's the most egregious version of all of them, and Disney has explained that particular instance away as a distributor thing. So they claim that between the time they cut the final film and then when it either went to the theater, or more specifically, they say it was when it went to Laserdisc. And when it got sent to Laserdisc, whoever the middleman was in between, like taking their film reel and then putting it on the Laserdisc, some sneaky little guy in the editing room, according to Disney, snuck those like 2 or 3 frames into The Rescuers. And then it didn't happen on Disney property, and it wasn't, Disney animators that did that. You'll never know. The world will never know.
It wasn't frames. It was edits to the existing frames. And if you don't know what it is, folks, just Google The Rescuers Disney Sexy, and you'll be entertained for about 3 minutes.
It's the most obvious one. All the other ones they've explained away as like not like, no, you didn't see what you think you saw. But that one you can't deny. Although one little tidbit on that is that even if you had the Laserdisc version, they snuck it into like the 29th frame or something. They snuck it into a frame that you wouldn't have seen unless you were pausing and like advancing one by one. Even if you watched it at regular frame, you wouldn't have seen it because it would have been like cropped away in like a different frame rate. So it was definitely a hidden Mickey. It was dug deep in there.
The only way that actually became known was that the guy probably sat at home and says, nobody's finding this thing. I'm going to have to out myself under a different identity saying, hey, look what I found.
They've also never identified the woman. There was like a whole, sort of research effort to find out, who was actually displayed. But as far as I know,
Yeah, because
that's
it's a poster.
unknown.
It looked like it wasn't original art. It was some sort of a French poster. But
Maybe. I mean, that it's also been said that it could have been whoever snuck it in was like a candid photo that they had.
oh well, that would have been all kinds of terrible. Um, but you decided to go into publishing all your favorite conspiracies. Do you remember what got you into conspiracies? What was your favorite? What got you hooked?
I think just growing up with X-Files was like a really, really big one. I mean, I grew up in the late 80s, early mid 90s, and just kind of like having that stuff blow my mind and then going online onto the internet and searching, all the stuff that they were bringing up in the show and then finding like the deeper lore that, oh, it didn't just come from this TV show. Like they're emphasizing it, right? They're embellishing it and they're putting a budget behind it, but the stories that they were drawing on all seem to tie to real things. And I guess that was kind of like the gateway drug to conspiracies was, X-Files. And also just that time period, it almost felt innate that like nobody trusted the government and it was always like us against them. And there was this like rebellious kind of just zeitgeist, and I feel like I got swept up in it at just the right time. So we had Art Bell, we had like all kinds of wild radio shows. William Cooper was still alive, so it was kind of just like the perfect storm of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s on a steady diet of World Weekly News, which it's a newspaper, so I was treating it like it was like, well, why aren't these weird stories on television? Cutting out every UFO tale there was, but yeah, I love the X Files. One I loved more than the X Files, and it only lasted a single season, was Dark Skies. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
It doesn't ring any bell. I think I have seen it, but you'd have to refresh my memory on what the plot
Yeah, it's
line was.
John Lowengard, the character. J.T. Walsh was in it. He ran MK Ultra, and it was literally it was 1996, and the whole season was the 60s decade. 1997 was going to be the 70s, and 98 was the 80s, and catch up at 2000 present day. But it was like, it had John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and all the conspiracies were tied to MK Ultra. So they were laying out the fictional story of why this was all going on, and of course, it was all because of aliens. And
That's not ringing any bells, but I'm already I'm gonna definitely watch it. I mean, you just hit
It's
every
on
one of the
DVD.
big ones. There was
It's on
also in that
DVD,
same
yeah.
time period there was a show called Nowhere Man, I believe, and I remember that one kind of rocking my world. It didn't really like survive for too long, but it was basically this guy that goes into work and they're just like, "Who are you? You don't work here." And like his secret, his social security number gets removed, and everyone that he thought he knew just act like they didn't know him anymore. And I just remember, I mean, I guess feeling like an outcast, 13-year-old or whatever, growing up and going through everything in the world. I sort of like related to this guy that like everyone was like, I don't even know who you are. And I don't know, that's still a concept that runs through my mind as like the ultimate conspiracy. Just like whatever, you wake up one day and everyone you know is like, I don't know who you are.
that's a lot like Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere.
It's just the ultimate gaslighting, right? That's all it is.
Yeah, exactly. And how many shows have we seen like that, where like the action hero is like, my wife was in this hospital. Who? Then no woman came through this door. And then everyone's denying that the plane crashed. That never happened. But it was fun.
It's a
Ray
common
Wolf,
trope
you-
now. Like if you go on
Yeah.
the trope sites, it's just like, oh man, there's nothing new under the sun.
No, there's not. If you're stuck for a writing guide, just go to the trope site and pick one of the tried and trues. That's
Right.
why they're there. Gray Wolf Graphics, W.D. Smith said, I used to listen to Coast all the time in the early 90s. I did too, and it's still going, but I don't know. It seemed like every time I would finally have an opportunity to listen to Coast, it'd be boring. It'd be one of the boring nights. It'd be like, I'm tuned in for the UFOs. I'm tuned in for the disclosure, and I'd be like, oh, I can listen to it tonight, and it'd be like, and today the new tax bill is trying to hide the fact that you're going to be paying double taxes when you buy margarine. I'm like, I don't care about this.
You had to be the change you wanted to see when it came to Coast back in the day.
Yes, you had to call in with something like, I just saw a light.
It was usually a fight between Coast to Coast and Love Lines for me with Dr. Drew. That was like such an entertaining early radio show.
Yes, yes. But yeah, and I was growing up around Scott Air Force Base, so I was living there when they had the big black triangle go over the sky, and I missed it because I was out of town. And then the whole I was in Little Rock, and then again still in Little Rock, headlines all over the place that Scott Air Force Base area, Muscoda, Illinois, birds just took a nosedive en masse and were like sticking out of the ground like lawn darts. Like, why am I not there? Come on. And they never did explain it. It just was, news cycle 24 hours, and now it's gone.
What about the Mena, Arkansas story too, right? Where Barry
Oh,
Seal allegedly had thrown some bales over, and those two teenagers got caught up in the
got
middle.
tired, took a nap on the tracks. Yeah,
As you do.
normal.
You took, you smoke 2 joints, and you're just like, let's sleep on the tracks here.
Yeah. This looks like a good spot. Oh yeah. The Arkansas stories are many and varied, and
They call Arkansas for a reason, right?
yeah, we don't speak of the Clinton Mafia. It was a real division because I was living here when he was president, and it was like you either really really loved him or you really really hated him. There was no in between. And if you really really hated him and you were at an event where he came in the room, you really really loved him until he left the room, and then you were literally like, wait a second, that was, oh man.
He just exuded MK Ultra mind control
He
to everyone
did.
around him.
I mean, he would remember if he saw you the last time. He would remember the names of your kids. He would ask about you. It was just preternatural. I worked with a guy when I was in Little Rock. He said, I nearly changed the course of history the other week because it was when he was governor. Well, he was president, and he was telling the story about when he was governor. Like, it was foggy. I was driving downtown on Capitol, and I was going past the McDonald's, and I slammed on my brake because somebody ran out in front of me, and he just turned and looked with a big old deer in the headlights. It was Bill Clinton in his jogging suit, jogging to the McDonald's from the Capitol building. He's like, could have changed the entire course of history there if I'd have been a little slower on the brakes.
Unless it was one of the clones.
Oh, could have been any one of them.
Yeah.
The clone material is deteriorating too, though. I mean, sometimes the face is starting to sag. It's really showing on Biden. The genetics are turning back to soup.
Yeah, I think they're just running out of budget on his particular clone sort of, oversight, but I think that Kamal's probably got a few in stock already.
We could probably go off on conspiracies all night long that are current. I mean, from Pizzagate forward, I think the idea of a conspiracy, it used to be fun, and now that's getting ridiculed. And I'm thinking, all I can think of is what Gandhi said. First they laugh at you, then they mock you, and then you win. So
maybe, although he was also assassinated, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
So
not
if
how
that's
you win,
winning,
sir.
then sure.
Yeah, I really don't want to win that way.
Yeah, I've got a different
The
flavor
theory
of
kicker.
winning, but whatever.
So do you have any current conspiracies that are occupying your time?
I mean, so the Pizzagate's a big one because I started wanting to write a book on what if a bunch of teenagers ordered adrenochrome off the dark web, and they did it. And then I started thinking, well, how would you do it? And what would happen to you if you did something like that? So I went down this rabbit hole of just researching, like, who out there has actually done it? Have they reported what the side effects were, and how did they get it? And, all of those details. And I went into it thinking that it was just going to be immediately disproven. Someone was going to be like, yeah, I did it, and I threw up, and that was the end of it. But it turned out that it really had been linked to like very early psychedelic research, and that psychedelic research was funded by the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, who also happened to pass the baton of funding over to MK Ultra. So I was like, hold on a second. I went into this expecting to kind of make like a silly joke out of it and like, play with adrenochrome as an idea in a comic book. And then
You forgot to turn your VPN on, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I've definitely got I've got a few of them. But I mean, it was crazy because everywhere you look, it's just articles saying there's nothing to this. It's not a psychedelic. This has all been disproven. And then when you're like, okay, let me go and find that research article that said it was disproven, and it's not there. It's like none of those are there. But what are there are the original research documents that said like, hey, we found this thing that's in the human body that looks very close to mescaline, and it has the same sort of side effects as mescaline, and it's groundbreaking because there's no other chemical that we're aware of that you can extract from a human being and give to another human being and have them have like basically a psychedelic experience, right? Like a completely different experience.
So
You'd had
yeah,
it from
because if it's in your body, why isn't it giving you a psychedelic experience?
Well, so what they originally did is they were looking at dementia patients and people that had schizophrenia, and they noticed that they had like 4 to 10 plus times the amount of adrenochrome in their blood levels as someone that you'd consider normal. So the original thinking was that it's the adrenochrome itself that's causing them to, trip out and act weird. So then it was like, well, can I take the blood of a schizophrenic patient and, IV it up to me, and then will I become schizophrenic temporarily? And some of the earlier and crude experiments indicated that there was something to that. It wasn't just necessarily, suck it out of this dude and poke it into that dude and then he's tripping or anything. But there was enough to it that inspired all sorts of, fictional and research papers. Like, this is kind of where all of the pop culture version of adrenochrome comes from. This is where it comes from in Clockwork Orange, where they've got drenochrome or drenchrome in the background of the Moloko bar. That's one of the 4 psychedelic drugs that they have on the wall there. It's also written about in a short story in High Times called Blood of a Wig, about 2 guys that break into a schizophrenic hospital to inject the blood of one of the patients there, because not only do they trip out, but they say that they can relive that person's life. And that ties on this whole other thing. And that's where I kind of like originally came from it, because I found this old article that claimed it was from the 1600s. It said they were snorting ground up pineal glands and using that to inherit the knowledge of the person that they snorted it from. Now, this was all BS, about the roughly the same as you might expect, but like this is this like ever evolving mythology of being able to like ingest something from another person and then inherit their knowledge / power or something in a very like practical and non-metaphorical way.
Yeah, well, what was it? The planarian worms. Where the experiment with planarian worms, where they were able to teach this little flatworm to run a maze, and
Right.
then they would cut it up and they would feed it to the other planarian worms, and then the planarian worms that they fed it to were able to run the maze without having been trained on it. So,
Right, this is the flatworm experiment, and that
Yeah.
in itself has conspiracy theories tied to it, because that researcher was at the atoll sort of like nuclear tests, and there's a really weird overlap with these scientists that made huge breakthroughs that all happen to be at these initial testing grounds. And that his research too points to something called like Lamarckian evolution, which is a little bit counter to Darwin. And it's
Right.
basically that concept of like a genetic knowledge that you can pass it down to your kids. I don't know of many others that have repeated that flatworm experiment where you can like feed it and it keeps learning, but it strikes at exactly what we're talking about here, about wanting to like consume another thing and then gain its knowledge. It's if that was a real thing, you can imagine that anyone that had the resources and time and money and ability to do so would be doing so.
Yeah, like give me an Einstein on rye, please.
A little schmear of Einstein.
Yeah, exactly. So you started putting all this stuff together into different books. Are they books, comic books, pamphlets? What is the merch on? You know what? Why don't I just go there and share the page? I would just.
Yeah, it's all of the above. It started with little pamphlets. So I don't know if you know what chick tracts are.
I love chick tracts.
So
I
the
used to
very
read them religiously. No pun
The
intended.
first big one was this one right here. It's the Paranoid pamphlet MK Ultra, and it's basically a chick track about MK Ultra, and it gets into all sorts of research. And here's one about Jose Delgado, and he had the stimoceiver, which is where they put this little receiver in a bull's head and then would be able to like control it. It also mentions a little lesser known ones. So it says here about the pleasure center of a donkey being hit with an electronic carrot. So this is the opposite of the Stimosiever. So instead of zapping their head, you zap their other head, negative and positive. It's got JFK assassination stuff built in. And then I've got another one here called the Homunculus Owner's Manual that was co-written by, as far as I know, the country's only homunculologist, this guy named Juan Ayala. And it's about every version of a homunculus: alchemical, spiritual, Crowleyan. There's even something we called an Epsteinian homunculus, because Jeffrey Epstein was potentially trying to do something called the Moonchild ritual, which is a Aleister Crowley described homunculus that you make that's magical. And that was something that Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard did out in the desert too. So all kinds of, those are the two pamphlets. And then I've got like,
why am I not finding these in
30+
gas
books.
station bathrooms? Because
So, dude, I've actually looked and found the printer that Chick uses, but I can't get them to respond because they're in Thailand. And long story short, they can afford to print these things up at like 4 cents, 12 cents a piece on the high end. For me, it's a little more. It's like closer to like $1 a piece. So to just like flood a town with, 2,000 of these, like, that's the cost of a
Right.
small used car. So
Yeah,
as soon as I can find a way to make it so I can, because that's what Chick does, is that like, you can just buy a box of like 500 and it's, pennies on the dollar, and then you can just give it out to people. My initial plan, actually, when I had this MK Ultra one printed, it was at the end of 2019, and I got like 5,000 made up, and because I live in Orlando, and I was going to go to Universal Studios, SeaWorld, Legoland, all the Disney worlds, and just, casually leave them places.
yes.
And then, like, literally the week that I got the boxes printed, pandemic hit, and then the last
That
thing
was planned,
anyone,
dude.
they saw what I was doing, and it was all for me. But the plan was, have someone just pick this up in like a bathroom or on, like a toll booth, but we don't have toll booths. But then what happens, right, is that no one wants to touch trash. People are spraying down their groceries with bleach. So the last thing you're going to do is find something out on in the park and grab it and take it home and like touch it and stuff. So it was just the worst timing
brilliant.
to do what I originally planned to do. So I switched back and focused more on traditional comics, although I've got a bunch more pamphlets coming out, but now I've got like 30 or 40 comic titles.
Yeah, you showed that second one there, and I almost brought this up. I'm like, no, that's too weird to bring up on this show. But then you brought up the homunculus tract.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
the
it's
weirdest
like a constant theme.
Oh, the weirdest rabbit hole on YouTube I ever went down was not flat Earth or no, we didn't land on the moon. It was this guy showing a series of videos where he'd injected his junk into a chicken egg
Yes.
and was growing up. I'm like, this looks real, but this has got to be like some of the best homegrown CGI I've ever seen.
There was a Russian account. There was a few, but one of the main ones, I looked deeply into this because we were writing a series of things on a homunculi, and from what I can tell, it was a combination of gelatin and a piece of sponge that like you cut up like ahead of time, and then you
Yeah.
could soak that in this gelatin mix, and then with the right lighting and the right dye and everything, you could lift it up and wiggle it so that it looked like this little creature covered in some kind of goo or slime, right? I would love to be able to recreate some of those, but we actually might have a homunculus growing kit coming out soon. I don't want to spill too much on that, but
They've got those little, dinosaur growing kids. Just, put a
I'm telling you, we've looked into that, and I think I might have something that's coming together. It's not easy to make alchemical kits legally.
Well, no, not those. You've got to basically do it with water. Those are the ones you can make. Was that how AOC was born, with a chicken egg? And I don't want to know. I
The
don't
full
wanna-
process is pretty crude. I don't know how far you want to get into it.
Oh, well, it was. It reminds me of the opposite. Now there's a radio host in St. Louis, Dave Glover, and every once in a while he would have like paranormal Tuesdays, and he'd have different guests on. They would go to the Exorcist house in Soulard. They would do different things on Halloween, and one time he had a Kabbalah master on there. Whatever you call a Kabbalah master, it's like he's like really deep into it, and they're talking about the numbers and the faith and all that, and he's treating this one straight. And I'm calling up. I'm like, look, I want, and I got through. Amazingly enough, it was a very popular show. I said, I want to know when you're going to go out and make a Gollum. And Dave's like, yeah, okay, I'm really sorry. You know, my guests are used to a certain thing. You know, sometimes we get into jackassery. I want to apologize. Oh no, we can make a Gollum. And he's like, what? Why are we making a Gollum in the studio right now? I want a Gollum right here. And he starts talking about, you know, well, you have to have the right conditions and you have to have the right intent. I was like, yes, let's hijack the show with a Gollum. I want that.
And it is a homunculus. I mean, depending on where you stretch the definition, a homunculus is essentially an open vessel that can look like a human and can have all the functions, but it just is missing a soul. So you could even
Yeah.
stretch that to be, you know, like an AI or some sort of like a robot. In fact, the movie AI that was created by Steven Spielberg was originally going to be made by Stanley Kubrick, or at least he was writing a script for that movie. And in his notes, he specifically was referencing that the core protagonist was going to be a homunculus, and it was going to be based after this traditional alchemical version of a real homunculus. Now, that obviously got lost because he died after Eyes Wide Shut, and then it passed over to Steven Spielberg, and Steven Spielberg just kind of like, you know, flopped his thing all over it. So the same way that Stanley Kubrick might have with like a Stephen King novel, right? So there's a little bit
Yes.
of poetic justice.
Oh, well, it was, you think little man because, you know, the Latin, you know, it's the homo for man, and then the eula suffix usually means little. So you think, you know, it's a dwarf or smaller, a little elfin kind of guy. But yeah, it's if you're making it, then it can be a 10-foot tall homunculus if you want. Like
Well,
Gollum.
that's because what you're talking about is the Aristotelian homunculus. So there's like so many, but the Aristotelian homunculus, you know, via Aristotle, was that inside of everybody's sperm there was just like a little tiny, fully formed man, and then this is kind of like a very misogynistic view, right? But they basically thought that since the little man's already there, then the woman is really just like the womb is just a thing. Like you can replace the womb with a cow womb, or you can replace the womb with if you
Sure,
just
yeah.
make a little hole in the mud, right? And as long as you can keep it warm, and they would use dung of animals to like simulate the warmth of a human womb. As long as you could simulate what a womb looks and kind of feels like, then you can just put that little man in there and let him grow. So you imagine all of these like incel alchemists out in the woods that don't bathe and they don't interact with anyone, and they definitely don't have any sort of like romantic, you know, leads, and they're just like, well, I still need progeny. I still need a little guy to like pass all of my stuff on to and my knowledge, a little
Yeah.
helper. So like, what if I just go out in back of the shed here and just make a little dude? I don't have to go out into town and shave and do anything, right? So I think there was a little bit of that to this too, where it was just like, you know, I don't want to have to socialize, but I also want a child.
Yeah. It's and you know why not just, you know, put it into the into the earth or into a vessel and just watch it. This is, folks, the paranoidamerican.com website, and you got your shop here with the comics, The Chosen One. I laugh at that every time I see it. You got shirts and stickers. Stickers. Let's take a look at stickers.
Yeah, and I just dropped I've got one behind me here. I've got this Adrenochrome party pack. It's got all Adrenochrome sort of themed stickers inside of it, along with I'm not going to show everything that's in it because there's like a bunch of cool little secrets and stuff. But yeah, there's a whole.
Looks like a
actually,
Mountain
I got
Dew
them all
bag.
wrapped up. Got like a little keychain in here, but yeah, I've got some stickers in here that are themed after like Mountain Dew. You got Ethos, Budweiser, Coca-Cola, like all the popular brands, and it's basically made to put over like a Coke can or, you know, your beer bottle or whatever.
Yeah, and you got the McDrenochrome sticker over here.
That's one of them, yeah.
I don't know who the girl is on her knees, but I want that sticker for some reason.
So that one's a worshipful master because she's dressed like a master mason in that one.
Okay, yeah. I'm down with that. Give me a worshipful master. Wait, no. I don't know what end of the equation I end up being on that one. But it looks like a lot of fun. You got your podcast menu over here.
Dive into a realm where
Yeah, this is something new for me, doing podcasts in general. I just started doing it maybe like a year ago at the most. And And it's been a wild ride just because it's expanded the audience so much more. And in fact, now I think like 3 or 4 of my comics exist because of podcasters. The Chosen One is a comic book about podcasters, featuring podcasters that I know, and there's just more and more of that coming.
And I would think that running a podcast and having the Paranoid American website and the business model that you've got there, you basically tapped into a free source of information. Because you'll have, like running Coast to Coast, you'll have the whack job on the phone that's going to throw out something you've never heard of before. But man, wouldn't it be fun to play with that idea and build a conspiracy around it?
I mean, that's exactly what the Chosen One essentially is. Like, maybe I'm a little bit living under a rock, even in the conspiracy world, but I hadn't heard of like Tartaria prior to doing like podcasts and linking up with people on podcasts. That was exclusively came from like the podcast world. And then Tartaria leads into like old world. Okay. Well, okay. So Tartaria, I'm going to butcher part of this because I'm a little bit biased. Like I haven't bought fully in, but Tartaria is a concept that anything that you know that happened before the year 1800 essentially didn't actually happen, and it's all been written in the history books. For example, Copernicus never even existed. He was just a complete fabrication. Everything that we've known that's in history books is a complete fabrication, and that really there was this almost Atlantean-style empire that had advanced technology and culture and morals and everything. They ruled the world, and they were known as Tartaria. And the basis for a lot of these theories is because old maps that come from pre-1800s, they've got all of Asia Minor and Russia just labeled as Tartaria. And there's a lot of old books that talk about the Tartarians as if it's like this all-encompassing wisdom from like the East, sort of. So the premise is that the wildest version is that when the colonialists came over to America for the first time, all of these amazing buildings that are in like Chicago, for example, and like New York, they were there already. The Tartarians had already been here, had already made skyscrapers and these majestic cathedrals with this intricate stonework, and that we don't have the technology to do any of that today in modern times. And that furthermore, the world fairs, at the Chicago World Fair and all these other ones, that they were claimed that they were made out of plaster of Paris and they just knocked it all down after they were done because it was temporary. Well, that was a cover story to knock down these ancient structures that were built by the Tartarians. So they put up these fake world fairs and then knocked them down and said, oh no, it was just plaster of Paris. But really, they just destroyed, thousands and thousands of years of history. So that is just the tiniest little dipping your toe into the shallow end of Tartaria. But I had never even heard of that.
Sounds like the longer version of the last Thursday theory, which, basically espouses that everything that ever existed started existing last Thursday. And you just built into it was the memories of everything that would precede that.
Yeah, and also the everything you know is a lie trope. I mean, you can sort of just like throw a couple darts at the trope board and come up with some of these. But this one has an amazing amount of buy-in, and it also dovetails for reasons I'm not entirely sure about yet with flat earth theories. And flat earth theories is something that I was aware of, but never understood how many people took it seriously until I also started doing podcasting and hearing the passion behind some of the arguments.
Yeah. My favorite is, of course, that the world is not flat. The world is obviously round, but we're living inside it. And the sun is at the center.
Right.
And I don't know how it works, but the thing is, the further you get away from the ground, the more you and your instruments of measurement shrink. So if you're 1,000 feet in the air, you're suddenly only 3 feet tall, and the further you get away from the surface, you get smaller and smaller. So it looks like it's this infinite distance.
So it's not perspective; it's actually like physical matter that's changing.
Yes, exactly. It's not perspective at all.
Still more believable than flat Earth.
Yes. And how are you going to prove? How are you going to disprove it? You can't say. Never.
Well, see, that's the best part about those particular types of conspiracy theories, because as soon as you say, yeah, but you're using math that was discovered before 1800 and therefore it's all lies. And once you can keep pulling that card out over and over and be like, yeah, but what are you basing this on? Oh, you're basing it on something that like is like a mathematical theorem or some kind of scientific proof. Well, I don't believe none of that. So now what? You know, it's like it's the forever trump card.
Yes. Now, when you talked about Tartaria and like this hidden country, it reminded me of one of. I have so many favorite conspiracy theories all of a sudden. They're all in me, and no, it's not Atlantis, but it's Taured. Have you ever heard of the country of Taured?
I don't think so.
Okay, so in apparently 1950 or 60, in that era, there was an issue at an airport in Europe where a man was like trying to get on the plane to Taured. And they're like, where the hell do you think you're going? He's like, I'm going back home. I'm going to Taured. And he produced documents. He produced a passport. And it was all for this country called Taured, which supposedly existed in between Spain and Italy. And as they're trying to work this thing out, to find out who the hell this guy is, he disappears.
This sounds familiar, although I remember coming across this story as like almost like a precursor to creepypastas. Like it was like an urban legend more so than like a documented event.
I think this one was supposed to be documented, but who knows on the internet? We fake the documentation now. Which is why
presidents are making their own birth certificates in Photoshop, right? So anything's game.
Exactly. So Time Samplers. That looks like an interesting comic. I mean, these all look, Secret Mystery School. That looks like a fun book as well.
These ones are the ones that I started with. Time Samplers was kind of my I used to refer to it as my kitchen sink comic, where it was like the first thing that I did, so it had every idea in my brain all in one book. And then I rapidly discovered that you can take every idea that you've got and put it all into one thing. So that's kind of where it splintered out, and it became a bunch of different titles. It came Time Samplers, Secret Mystery School, another one called Black Mass Pizza, that's done but just not out yet.
I mean, well, any comic that you're going to throw Nikola Tesla onto, I'm there.
That's the game. Yeah, that's the whole game.
Because if you want to talk conspiracy theories, you could have an ongoing forever podcast on Nikola Tesla and conspiracies. They just swarmed around.
And on that, my 5th issue of Time Samplers, we basically focus entirely on Nikola Tesla. Like Nikola Tesla, through the whole entire series of Time Samplers, is a key component. But in the very 5th issue, they go and they like save him. They go back into the past and they save him. And I'm not giving too much away here. But it ends up being the old, cranky, slightly crazy version of Tesla, because everyone always romanticizes this like brilliant genius, but a lot of people don't realize that he had like severe OCD. He had to like walk around the block multiple times before he'd enter a building. He'd have to turn a light on and off a few times. He was repulsed by human hair. So like if you had too much hair, if like there was hair around like on the ground or anything, like he had a lot of very peculiar things. He hated fat people. Like he would like make it known that, he was disgusted by you because you were overweight. He had all these very peculiar sort of characteristics that would make him just an unlikable person. So we kind of take that approach with it, and then to combine with that and his very old age, a lot of people claim that he started like losing his mind, but he was writing poetry to pigeons. And he even claimed that, and this is a direct quote, that I loved that pigeon like a human woman. All right, I might be paraphrasing that slightly. So like, but this is like actual things that he was writing down. So that's the Tesla that we run into at the end, with all of like the interesting tidbit. And that's kind of the theme of most of my books is, you might see Tesla on the cover and you're going to get Tesla, but it's going to be a subversion of what your expectations are. Because
when you have a guy when you have a guy who's this brilliant, who's inventing everything, who's changing the world, then yes, what's going to happen is that the real masters of the world are going to start injecting him with adrenochrome and inducing a sort of dementia into him. They're like, we got to ruin this brain right now.
Or maybe taking it away from him, because that's what was giving him all his good ideas.
Oh yeah, he could have been just overloaded on adrenochrome, the good stuff, the good kind. It's like
I think.
like
I mean,
cholesterol, HDL and LDL. It's
if we had to put cards on the table, that's where mine would be at. It's that they want this like creativity in a bottle almost, and that's grossly oversimplifying it. But I think you can kind of reduce it down to that.
yeah. Well, out of all these comics, the one that's not on your website is the one that's over here on Indiegogo. And yeah, wow, 45 minutes into the show, and we finally got to the topic. The topic at hand. And this is Chaos Twins. Now, this is written by Sam Tripoli, who's a stand-up comic. How did you and Sam cross paths and get into business like this?
He had me on a show where we talked about occult Disney, and we got into like Disney's past and him and Desmoulins and just his upbringing and all kinds of cool stuff about like Fantasia and Pinocchio and the Snow White and the Seven Dwarves and just all the classics. And afterwards, he just really expressed that he'd been wanting to put out a comic, and I was like, well, let's do it. So it kind of sprouted from that initial meeting. And shout out to Mark Steves, who runs Alt Media United, which is kind of this conglomeration of independent podcasts. But he was the original one that kind of linked us. And then, man, this Chaos Twins has been in the works for about 18 months or so. So it's been awesome to see this thing completely, just blow every boundary and expectation out of the water. Like, we needed 3,500 to essentially pay for the print run. That wouldn't even come close to paying back for like the artwork and everything else, but this was just like enough to get some printed and out there. And now we're already, I just talked to him today, we're already talking about issues 2 and 3 and working on an animation. And so the real goal for this thing keeps getting higher and higher.
Yeah, because you're at 23,000 right now. I'm refreshing just to see if any of our listeners went out
We're
there.
almost, whoever is the next one is going to be number 300.
Oh, okay. Somebody's got you guys. You want to be number 300, right? You want to have something that you can claim as your own, like that. And let's face it. How often are you going to get something as cool as being a backer with double zeros in the number? That's all you guys do is back comics on my show. So get in and do that. It's a badge of honor. You said something just a second ago that it's hooked into my brain. Occult Disney.
Yeah.
And okay. So bring me up to speed on that.
So I've got another podcast that I've been doing for the last year called Occult Disney, with Matt Comagese, and we essentially started with Fantasia because I lay out this theory that's not entirely mine, but it succinctly basically says that Fantasia was an actual magical incantation that brought the world of Disney into reality to where it is now just as real as any culture or tradition that existed before it. It just out of nowhere, now Disney becomes a real facet of everybody's life forever. And then that's with Fantasia establishing that premise. And then we went back to the very first feature animation, which was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And we've been rewatching every single animation. And we're going to go all the way through to whatever the latest ones are. But in every single episode, we look up the original story, whether it was Grimm's fairy tales or some other source. We look at the production history. We look at like any weird promotional campaigns that Disney might have done. And then we look at exactly where Disney deviated from the source material and maybe why. And we look for all the hidden Mickeys. We look for the boobs in the windows and all of that.
Yes.
In just complete detail.
And what's funny is we talked about hiding the boobs here and hiding the boobs there. If you want to see boobs in Disney, just watch Fantasia. They're like out in the open
right.
the whole time.
That's right. They've got the wood nymphs and like the Centaurians are in there, right?
Yes, absolutely. Corey Barton in the house. If you guys want to see some real comic book art, go check out Corey Barton's channel and watch the stuff he's drawing. The man's a master. You also mentioned the original fairy tales, which George, if you're watching, would be having an apoplectic fit if I didn't say, oh yeah, by the way, from Critical Blast Publishing, the Brothers Grimm, the complete illustrated fairy tales hardcover. It's one of the links below. Just go ahead and click it, take you to Amazon. This is the family Bible size version hardcover. This is the expensive coffee table version. We have a smaller paperback version that's more economical. But if you're a true collector, you want the cool stuff.
And the Brothers Grimm is a completely fascinating topic in its own right, because a lot of people take for granted all of these fairy tales that we've got now that are almost ubiquitous, but without the Brothers Grimm, almost none of that would exist. They painstaking because they started out as historians. They wrote about all sorts of Germanic history. Like they were the authorities in German history, and then they decided, let's go and kind of like scrape together and find all these tales that are out in the countryside. They would go up to people's doors and knock on them and made this, big compilation of all the stories that they came across. And that in itself began this new revival into Germanic culture. You could make a strong I'd make a strong argument that you have the Grimm fairy tales, and then you have Disney hopping on top, just throwing gas on the fire because he latched on to Grimm fairy tales. And then that sort of inspires this new wave of German nationalism, because now that they're like reinvigorated with all this folklore, and they didn't realize, oh my God, all these stories that everyone's talking about, like this is our culture. Maybe we're the root culture. So Grimm to Disney to the big bad H dude, there might be like a very direct line that you can tie between those. And ultimately, if Brothers Grimm never published their book or didn't get as popular, you might not have never had a World War II or World War I.
I can see that happen. And you talk about tropes. When I was compiling this book, and because it's the original, but I had to read it because we're like picking out things to illustrate. You had a lot of recurring themes in these stories. The wicked stepmother is a recurring theme in a lot of different stories. And I was like, this is not coincidental. There must have been something that happened somewhere, and people just kind of hid it in this fictional story, and it became different fictional stories. You see the same things happening, but they're in different stories all the time.
Well, this is one of the oldest tropes ever, because the wicked stepmother is also the old crone, the old hag. It's Lilith. It's Lil. It's essentially what you would call the perpetual maiden, right? So it's a woman that is no longer able to reproduce, essentially, and she becomes scorned about that. So then the subject of her scorn becomes any youthful woman that has the ability that she no longer has. And that's typically this this older archetype that are in these Disney movies. It's one of the most common versions of that. But that, I mean, this trope goes all the way back to the original stories of Lilith and Lil, which were also these perpetual maidens. And there was even stories that if you had a nocturnal emission, right? If your husband had like a dirty dream with evidence afterwards, then that meant that Lilith actually came and visited him in the night, and that you would have to get a legal divorce in the morning and go through all of like the proceed. Like it was it wasn't just fairy tales, right? This was like affected your legal, like you'd wake up and be like, crap, we got to go to court again. This sucks, But like, imagine something so baked in that this was, thousands and thousands of years old. If maybe the flatworm doesn't exist, right? Maybe Lamarckian genetic sort of knowledge passing down doesn't exist. But I feel like the same archetype or trope that's repeated in stories and folklore and just like everything for 5,000 plus years, that has to have some permanent effect on how like the modern brain is shaped.
Yeah, and there has to have been something. Some real event that inspired a story, and it's probably so diluted down, but it's also so widespread that whoever it is we can't remember will be remembered forever.
Aliens.
It's aliens.
Homunculus.
So, yeah, homunculus aliens, homunculins. I can't say the way I wanted to say it. So the Chaos Twins, this is sort of like your Wonder Twins team, because they are two twins, in case you didn't pick that up from the title. And they are shape changers living in Pleasantville, pretty much. Pleasantville for cryptids.
But every house in this town represents a different conspiracy theory or trope or some other dimension or realm. So this very first issue, it kind of jumps right. It's kind of like Tarantino-esque, where it like jumps towards like the main scene at the end, and then maybe it'll rewind back and record scratch, and you're wondering how we got here, right? Again, nothing new under the sun. But so this one basically takes for granted that they know where they live. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on. There's aliens that live across the street. As they're going on this adventure, they're pointing out all these different houses in town. This one leads to like a dimension where plants rule everything. This one is a literal memory palace as they pass through it. And then they conjure up all of their cryptid friends from another realm, and they go to battle with this huge mech nostalgia reptilian, like a robot thing. And then it all kind of like comes to this big crescendo and they go back home. It establishes like a really interesting formula, kind of just gives you a tiny little taste of this little sort of bubble that they live in and all the things that might be possible there. So this is just like, again, dipping your toe into the very introduction of what all this is about. And it's a unique experience for me and Sam because it's essentially like a kid-friendly, family-friendly comic. Like no dirty words, no like over-the-top controversial subjects. And if you know anything about Sam Tripoli or anything about me, this is sort of on the other end of the spectrum that I'm used to leaning into. But I actually have loved the process of this one because sometimes trying to like stuff every little edgy observation and like these deep references, it's more fun to do it with a completely different audience because you get to tell sort of like the same stories that I've had in the back of my mind, but in completely different ways that feel fresh to me. So, and it would be cool to have this with a much wider appeal than just like the weirdos that are really into Pizzagate, right?
Yes. Well, and I look at the art here and the representation of the characters, like the Mothman and all that, or the Mothman kids,
Moth
or whatever they
girl,
are.
excuse you.
Moth girl. I'm sorry, I misgendered her. It's kind of Animorphs meets Aqua Teen Hunger Force kind of thing.
I mean, you kind of nailed what some of the inspirations were here, because again, like the ultimate goal is to have this be an animation. Like we really are desperate to get a 7 to 11 minute pilot made of this. And again, like I worked at Disney for 10 years doing animation, so it's not foreign to me. Although I was always the guy that was just doing the thing would show up and I would do the thing. And I never had to worry about budgeting or hiring or like any of that aspect of it. So this is taking a completely different approach, but all the artwork is essentially drawn around this concept of, now let's make this thing pop off the page and start moving.
So I'm going to go real quickly here through the tiers because we've spent the whole show not talking about your book. You can get a digital copy. How big is this page-wise? I mean, how much story are we looking
It's
at?
a standard book. It's 20 pages. It's got 3 alternate covers, and there'll be some extra like behind the scenes stuff that gets added to like the backer exclusive copies essentially.
All right. So for $15, which is really standard, good price for a crowdfunded comic, you're going to get the physical copy and you're going to get a sticker, and you may get,
You'll get a couple free stickers. You'll get a print. You'll get a bookmark. We also hit the 15,000 a week ago, so that's going to be a mixtape called the Tinfoil Trap House, which will also come with all the digital and physical. But if it's physical, you'll get a little print that's got an artwork made by the artist for Chaos Twins, and on the back it'll have like a QR code to download the album and everything. So
I got you. Okay.
we're gonna load people up. Anyone that backed this thing physically is gonna get loaded up with lots of extra goodies, just as a surprise.
And you're real close to that 30,000 mark now. So
we are, and the 30's got an even cooler bonus, and every one of those means everyone that's backed the physical item is going to get extra stuff. So
now you're cheating because it said you'd reveal it at 15K. We still don't know what it is. And we hit 15.
Oh no, you're right. You're absolutely right. This thing has been just like gaining money nonstop. Like the backers has been overwhelming here. Like at a certain point, I realized like, oh, this is gonna be like 2 weeks of my life, boxing these things up and bringing them to the post office. Like this is no longer gonna be a weekend.
we can help you with that, but that's another story. For if you want 2 copies, look, save $2, $28. You get both covers. You get extra stickers. And not just repeat of the stickers, it's 3 unique stickers.
That's right. There's 6 total.
Yeah, because you're gonna get, if you get that signed copy for $40, here's all 6 stickers. You can just, it's almost like you could do the Color Forms adventure set with these characters because
you're reading my mind, man. I've got that on my mind too for a future thing.
Nobody's done that, and I've brought that up before. It's like color forms, guys.
I want
Just, you know,
a color form JFK assassination set.
that would be. Oh, yeah. Just look. I'm laying it out here. He's over here on the grassy knoll. There's no way he's got a direct line of sight to that car. You can see it right here. I went out and bought Shrinky Dink plastic, and I've still got it because it's useless to me now. Because I thought I could run it through my my printer, my color printer, and just print stuff out there, and then just like, hey, look, I can put these as extras in something. Cut this out, bake it at 350 for 10 minutes, and Shrinky Dink down your little logo. Yeah, the ink from inkjet printers just kind of smears right off of the plastic on those things, and it smears off on its way out of the printer. So bad idea overall on that one.
Sometimes it takes a lot of bad ideas to get to the good ones, though. You gotta get them, flush them out of your system.
Maybe I just need a different kind of printer, different kind of color printer other than inkjet, but or different. I don't know. I think there's a market there if we can figure out how to get it done. But that was something that's like when I was talking about color forms, like Shrinky Dinks. Nobody's done Shrinky Dinks. Let's print out Shrinky Dinks and put them out with your comic.
You know what else no one has done in a while, and I'm thinking about this too, are Pogs. I think Pogs are going to make a little bit of a comeback.
No, don't bring back Pogs. I'm already collecting.
And Beanie Babies.
Oh no. I'm already collecting poker chips for no good reason.
Oh yeah, so yeah, no, Pogs are going to make a comeback.
Unless it smells like sour milk, it's not a real Pog.
That's right. No, you're right.
So is every house in the neighborhood a portal? I mean, if so, why isn't their house?
I mean, that's going to have to be something that gets revealed over the course of the full 6-issue story arc. But there's definitely a reason that they're here. They were drawn to this town, and it's essentially all the adults are too blind to see it because the town's kind of being taken over by nostalgia. And in fact, that's the very first premise of the first issue, is that there's this ice cream that's in town that has all the adults kind of under the spell because it reminds them of, the ice cream that they grew up with. And it's all about how times used to be better in these golden ages. And of course,
Yes.
these two twin girls, they're immune to nostalgia because they haven't lived through, like getting into older ages to then reminisce about the earlier times. So this nostalgia kind of just completely bypasses them, which kind of makes them like Neo in the Matrix in a way.
Yeah, I remember the comment on the early example pages. There was like, and there's a disproportionate number of ice cream trucks to the citizens. I was like, that's foreboding. You can get a signed copy with all 6 stickers. You can get 3 copies. Now, when I say 3 copies, are they all the same cover, or
No,
do
they're
you have,
three completely different covers, and the only way to get the second and third cover would be through these campaigns. So if you get, covers 1 and 2, you can pick whatever covers that you want when you check these out. And before we send them all out, we'll make sure that they get signed to the right names and everyone gets whatever covers they want. But
you're signing specifically to people? That's
correct. And not only that, but Sam is gonna fly in. He's committed this already, but he's gonna fly into Orlando here, and we'll do a live signing event where we probably record him signing at least all the people that got like the 3 packs, and they're on camera and saying, "Hey, so and so, thank you. Here's your signed copies." So we're gonna make a big ado about it.
that would be a very big cool thing. You can get signed copies of 2 covers, signed copies of 3 covers. Super backer combo. This is we're getting into the heavy hitter stuff now. This is where you're gonna get a T-shirt. So you're getting the 6-pack of stickers. You're getting your name in the special thank you. You're getting 3 signed copies, the digital copy, and the Chaos Twins T-shirt for $120.
And all the extra stuff that we mentioned too, the bookmarks, the prints, the everything.
Yeah, the Peace on Earth with that thing about the kids.
Yeah, we will solve global conflict, in fact.
Yes. We'll draw you into the book for $250. I know there's a lot of people like that. We got 4 of them taken already.
I'm surprised this one's not already completely gone, because I mean, this is already a big comic. This is going to be read by over 1,000 people the week that it releases, and very good chance that multiples of that over the course of the year. So this is a chance to get into the Sam Tripoli tinfoil hat Paranoid American universe forever for $250. You'd be a little background character forever. Every reprint that ever exists. Maybe even if we go to animation, you might see yourself in the background of an animation. So,
That'd be very
everything's on the
nice.
table.
Like look, so Nessie's got to be carried around in her little tank. I'm just seeing that over here on this other page. Be a special guest on the podcast with Sam. That's why he didn't show up. I didn't have $1,500 to give him.
Right, yeah.
Damn. Okay. I get to do this for free.
And I warned him. I was like, "What happens if you get 200 people that sign up?" And he said, "I guess I got 200 episodes of content worth to get through." So, open to anyone. If you want to go on any one of his shows and talk about a weird topic or a story or anything, he's opening himself up to anything you want to bring up. So put it to the test.
For $1,500, I would. There's not many things I wouldn't do. And I'll just leave that up to the imagination. Not for $1,500, people would pay me not to do the things I'm thinking of.
The rest of the things on the table didn't seem appropriate, so we stopped it there.
So a lot of this stuff is gone already. The early bird stuff. This looks like a lot of fun. These are kids who can now. They go to this town. They got the portals and everything, but these kids also have powers. They've got these like animorph powers where they can become different. They can become different animals, but one of them just likes the one that she likes to become all the time.
So one of them, as far as we know in the first issue, that one of them can transform into a bird and one of them can transform into a bear. And it can be any kind of bear and it can be any kind of bird. Even like mystical birds like a phoenix or a bird that has a special beak that turns into a key that can only unlock a certain type of lock. Like, so the gamut is pretty wide. But yeah, Becca that wants to turn into the bear, she just loves grizzly bears. So she just tends to always turn into a grizzly bear. Just not lack of imagination, just she's a very practical sort of use of her powers. But they don't necessarily stop there, because again, they just moved into this town. They're fairly new, and this is just one of the things that can happen if you can really understand what's going around in this town. So they've got a sidekick that's a little witch / genie that runs around with them. They're friends with a miniature Bigfoot named Little Biggie. They've got Mothra. So it's all over the scope of, different things that they run into. And this is, again, just the cryptid version. So the very first issue is like one of the houses was a portal to a cryptid realm. And now there's, hundreds of other houses to do 100 other things.
Yeah. I would love to see the one girl try to turn into a koala bear and then get stymied and frustrated because koalas aren't bears.
Well, we're thinking them like water bears too, little tardigrades, or who
Yes.
knows? I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's all on the table.
If it has bear in the name, I guess it would work. I didn't know if it would work that way or if it had to actually like be in the bear family. The science has to work for magical transformations. All right. Gosh, Mr. American, we have reached past the top of the hour, and we did finally get to go over the comic and introduce people to its concept. I wish I could say that somebody had hit it. I'm going to reload it one more time and embarrass myself and say no.
That's right. Whoever gets the 300 is going to get extra stuff because you can see exactly who was the backer of what number. So whoever it ends up being, they're going to get hooked up with some extra stuff for sure.
Very cool. I'm going to take it down off the screen here because I want to look at some of the other stuff on here. And
and next year I'm plugging into all kinds of new stuff. I'm working on some physical products, like some custom toys, so like little minifigure sets. I've got this thing here, which is the Hunter Biden party pack. And
Lord.
it's fun. It's got like a little dime bag in there and some beer. It's got a gun, some money. They're all hand numbered, and then on the back it's got like a little nepotism fax.
Yeah.
So, and an actual warning here that I got from one of my friend's lawyers. I can't afford my own, but my original plan was to just have this be a crack pipe. Like you just buy it and it's just a crack pipe. But yeah, she told me that would technically be considered selling paraphernalia over state lines. So we decided against the actual crack pipe and went for
It's a straw.
Right.
It's a glass straw.
She told me you could only stretch that so far because I wanted to put Brillo pad in there and I wanted to like torch it and like give it some scorch marks and like, but you know, sometimes the limits of creativity have to, you know, go align with whatever the federal laws are.
Scorched glass straw. What's the matter with you people? Can't you tell?
But if you put
all
a
right.
rose in it, right now it's like a glass vase for a rose.
Now it's
But
art.
yeah.
Now it's become art. All right. Paranoid American, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. We were supposed to have him on earlier, folks, and I unsurprisingly effed it up, and we didn't have it. So we almost did it again tonight.
They were trying to stop us.
Yes. It's the harp waves that were targeting me and making me forget things.
It's the ionosphere. It's always the ionosphere.
So many things bounce off of that. It's my tinfoil hat didn't stop it, or well, they convinced me not to wear it, I guess. Damn, I should have been wearing one during the podcast. Why do I get these great ideas afterwards? Been talking about gay frogs and everything tonight. This has been a fun discussion, and I do want to check out your website further, and because I love digging into conspiracy theories, and I have friends who are all the same as that. So
Yeah, whenever you want to talk conspiracy theories, I'm your guy. Like I wouldn't claim to be an expert, but I feel like I've heard a little bit about everything, so I can be the jack of all trades conspiracy theorist.
I can probably definitely hook you up with a joint effort that we do with Sci-Fi for Me, where we do they have Live from the Bunker and we have Critical Blast, and whenever we have a guest who's like straddling the line, we do Blast from the Bunker and we simulcast to both channels. So we could definitely hook up a conspiracy discussion that would, who knows how long I could go on. I'll talk with
Let's
Jason
do it,
about
man.
this.
8+ hours, as long
Yes!
as there's like.
Well, I got demonetized, so I need the hours back. Let's do it. All right, everybody in the chat, thank you guys so much for being here tonight. We don't have a show without you guys. We're just a podcast falling in the woods otherwise. So we're happy you're here. And of course, as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night, everybody.